Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay family, we are rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is how to help young people heal from trauma. We have with us our co-host on tonight, Minister Ayanna Marks, and our guest for this evening is Shelley Edwards Jorgensen, author of Beautiful Ashes. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for myself or our co-host or our guest, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com, or you can text us at 437-778-3299. If you have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Ayanna, I would ask if you would greet our Love Bay listeners and viewers on tonight.
Hello, everyone. We have a beautiful segment again this evening. We hope that you take any information that you need, and we hope that everyone can receive everything that they need. And we hope that everyone just enjoys the segment and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So when TYB brings Shelley in, we will give Shelley her moment to introduce. Well, here she is. So Shelley, if you would refamiliarize yourself with our Love Bay family, because you've been here before.
Hi guys, it's been a while, and I'm glad to be back with you on a Friday night.
Thank you. And so Love Bay, as I mentioned, and as you know, Shelley is the author of Beautiful Ashes. So Shelley, if you would please take a moment and tell us again a bit about your book and where we can get that from.
Yeah, my book is my memoir. It's Beautiful Ashes. That's me just a couple years ago. More than 10, I'll just say that. I grew up with domestic violence, and so I had to overcome a lot of trauma from my youth, because when I was 15, my dad, who was a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type alcoholic, ended up murdering my mother and burning our house down. And just a whole litany of trauma ensued from that, and all kinds of other things. I kind of tell people I have a cornucopia. And so I've had to go from a very, very dark hole to thriving. And so I'm very passionate about just trying to help others find hope in their own journey. And so that's kind of my mission in life at this point.
Well, thank you so much, Shelley. I want to, Love Bay, as usual, start with sharing some resources before we go into our topic on this evening. First, if you would like to help us rise out of the ashes Inc., you can visit our GoFundMe link. If you go to GoFundMe and look for our nonprofit, one of our biggest endeavors is providing immediate and emergency funding for individuals who are dealing with or coming out of domestic violence issues. So we provide as much as we can for doctor's visits, transportations, school supplies, rent, utilities, help with rent and mortgage payments, and relocation. Whatever it is that we can do, we will do. But we do need help to be able to continue to do that. So you can visit our GoFundMe page, or you can write a check out to Rise Out of the Ashes Inc. Our address is P.O. Box 15. We are in Drexel Hill, PA, and our zip is 19026. I also have for you the National Domestic Violence Hotline. This is in the United States. The website is thehotline.org, and their number is 800-799-7233. I have the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. Their website is loveisrespect.org. Their number is 866-331-9474. And Native Love, the goal for Native Love is focused on preventing and ending dating violence for the next generation by encouraging and empowering Native young youth to reclaim what healthy relationships mean for them. And their website is NIDLove.org. wrc.org/native love. And then we have the Befrienders Volunteer Action to Prevent Suicide. To find a helpline by your country, you can visit befrienders.org. And once again, the title of Shelley's book is Beautiful Ashes, and which is available on Amazon. Am I correct, Shelley?
Yeah, it's available anywhere books are sold, but Amazon. You can also go to my website,
And your website is
Beautiful Ashes Memoir at .com.
awesome. Thank you so much. So, as we move into our topic on tonight, again, which is how to help young people heal from trauma, the first thing I want to do is establish the group that we're speaking of. So, our conversation on last week, when we were talking about young people, we established that age group from between 18 and 25. And that was different. That was more of how to help young people, I would say, use their voice, establish their voice, and whatever it is that may be important to you. If animal rights is important to you, if the issue of homelessness is important to you, and you want to speak up, how to advocate, how to advocate for that. It's very, very different when we're talking about how to help a young person heal from trauma. And I believe that age gaps open up. That is before 18. So we could be talking as young as middle school, definitely high school, and moving into college. So I don't expect any middle schoolers to be listening to this, but for the parents and for guardians and for those who have those children in their sight, um, we are speaking to that age group as well, because unfortunately our children of all ages have experienced some type of trauma. um, and my very first question, and I would ask you both, Shelley first, is um, I know we need to have a safe space. I know we need to do that. But what does a safe space look like? What do you believe a safe space looks like for being even able to bring our young people to the table, to make them comfortable enough to open up and be able to discuss their issues of trauma? What does it look like, Shelley?
Well, trust, and as I mentioned when we were chatting before we started, I just talked to a master's class of social workers. Many of them are already working in the schools. And, a lot of people always ask me because I do book clubs and stuff, because once people read my book, they have a lot of questions, especially with the way the systems failed me. And just, there's a lot of things that I had to overcome. And, everyone always asks me, well, what if I suspect that there's a domestic violence situation, or there's some sort of abuse going on with it? It could be, their female friend or even a child. And the first thing I always tell people is, first of all, if you're noticing any kind of sign, there's already a problem that's 100 times worse than you think it is. And so, what I told the students on Tuesday, who are actually training to be counselors, is if you come to know that you have a youth that is experiencing ongoing violence in the home, or any kind of trauma, that, especially when it comes to domestic violence, is they're trained not to talk about it. And so they're not going to come forward to you. And what I said would have helped me is that, because mine became very public. I mean, the night that the fire was out, it was on the 11 o'clock news, and so everybody knew. And I didn't have a counselor that came to me and started developing a relationship of trust with me, so I would feel safe, and that they could lead the questions. And to me, it's really about establishing trust over a period of time. Don't have the expectation that some teenager, first of all, they're gonna think that you don't have a clue, that you're just a dumb adult, and things are different, and they're so and if they don't trust you because when people are in situations where there's abuse and stuff in the home, they don't trust anybody because their primary caregiver is not doing their job.
Yes. And so thank you very much for that. And Ayana, I want to ask you the same question, but before we do, I want to mention to all of our college students, wherever school that you're in, if you're at Gwinnett, if you're at Lincoln, if you're at Drexel, Temple, wherever, there should be on campus a Title IX coordinator to be able to help you with any issues that you may be experiencing. There should also be a group on campus that should be able to help you with any issues dealing with sexual assault, domestic violence. There should be a group of peers that you should be able to go to. So if you don't reach out to one of the organizations, the local organizations in the area, you should be able to get help that you need on campus through counselors and through organizations that are set up there. So I wanted to throw that out there for any college students who may be listening. Now, Title IX coordinators should be in every school, even before you get to college. They should be in high school. They should be in middle school as well. But yeah, I wanted to throw that note out there for any of our students who are thinking, who may be away from home and thinking, what can I do, and trying to establish a safe area around themselves. You should have help on campus. So with that, Ayan, I ask you the same question. What does a safe space look like in your eyes?
A safe space to me, what it would look like is to where a child can come and safely talk without feeling like they have to hold stuff back because they fear that somebody's going to look at them differently. A safe space will be like the comfort that brings the child. Like it would make the child feel at home, feel at peace, or feel at ease, to where they feel like the world's not crashing down on them anymore. They feel like, okay, I have somebody who can take the weight off my shoulders. I have somebody who can finally help me breathe. I'm finally in a space where I feel like I can breathe now that I'm free, that I don't have stuff holding me back. That would be like a safe space for a child.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I want to share a little bit of an article that I was reading. It's the title of the article is How to Protect Your Teen from Dating Violence. This was written by Juliana Bragg, published a couple weeks ago on March 8th. And in the article, Juliana, she referenced the Netflix docuseries on Gabby Petito. She was 22 years old and killed by her fiance. What I want to do is just pull out just some facts because I think it's very disserving to our young people. We can be disserving to our young people as adults because we think that they don't go through things. We think that things don't touch them, that real life doesn't happen to them, and truly it does. And so just pieces from this article, one portion is that in the United States, teen dating violence remains common with about 1 in 3 teenagers experiencing physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner. And this is according to statistics from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The consequences of teen dating violence can be both immediate and long lasting. Victims are more likely to face depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and have aggressive behavior and suicidal thoughts, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Um, and just with that information right there, what I want to say to those adults, to those guardians, to those caretakers, to the individual who may find yourself with a young person coming to you with an issue, I want to say, first of all, there is no such thing as keeping a secret when you have a 17 and under age child coming to you with an issue of this magnitude. There is no such thing as I'm going to keep the physical abuse or sexual abuse or verbal abuse quiet. You have a responsibility once you know what is going on to get that child help. Once you know, once it has been brought to you, there are mandated reporters. I'm a minister, I'm a mandated reporter. Child care workers are mandated reporters. Teachers are mandated reporters. Doctors, counselors are mandated reporters. But if your neighbor comes to you and reveals this to you, you have a responsibility. You can make an anonymous phone call to whatever agency you need to. You can call the police anonymously. You can do whatever you need to do anonymously. But that responsibility is on your shoulders once you know of a minor being hurt in any kind of way. There comes a point where the adult actually has to be the adult. There comes a clear difference where I'm not your friend right now. I love you, I care for you, and I want to help you, but I'm not your friend right now. I have to exercise my responsibility as an adult. And unfortunately, some of us fail in that area. And one of the first things that I think I would want to express to a young person who has experienced any kind of hurt or harm, the first thing I would say to that person and to someone trying to help them is to express it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It needs to be made very, very clear, especially to a young person. It is not your fault. You are not to blame for what someone else did. In no way, shape, or form, it is not your responsibility for someone else harming you. And Shelly, I would ask for you to follow up on that. But in my mind, that's the very, very first thing that needs to be presented to a young person. It's not your fault.
Absolutely. And here's the thing: is that same year, because now we're talking about relationships, and this moves into sexual assault. So that's part of my story too. And being raised in domestic violence, I was trained to not talk about abuse from birth. And so that set me up to be victimized in other ways. And at 11 years old, I was molested by an older acquaintance of my parents when we were on a trip in Mexico. And then the last trip that we took as a family, in July of 85, so I was 15. Yes, I'm going to be 55 next month. But so I was 15, and now I'm in England, and we have family there. So my parents, because my grandmother was born in Scotland, my parents allowed my sister and I, my sister's 2 years older, allowed us to go to this teen, like young adult pub, nightclub thing with my mom's cousin's sons. And they, normally went. It was like dancing or whatever. Well, there's no drinking age really in England. So I'm thinking I'm all cool having my first beer. And I'm dancing with this guy who's in his early 20s. And I'm 15. And, I was interested in doing that. Okay, that was my choice. And then we got hot, and he's like, well, do you want to go outside and cool off? I said, sure, I'll go outside and cool off. Then he went to kiss me. I was good with that, but he ends up raping me in a field outside this pub. And I say nothing to anybody, okay? Now, I already been molested at 11 by another acquaintance of my parents. And then, so that happens in July when I'm 15. My mom gets murdered in October. And then my sister and I go back to Mexico where I was molested before, because my parents went to the same place every year. And my dad had just got arrested, and so he couldn't go. And he sends me and my sister with our older cousins. And the guy that molested me there is there again. He ends up raping me. So I tell nobody. I'm suicidal at this point, but because there was just too much. That was 7-month period. I was raped on 2 different continents, and my mother was murdered, and my dad was arrested for it, and I lost everything else. And so through my process of healing, and I didn't say anything to anybody until I was I was like 21 when I was getting I was talking to my bishop or my priest, and I thought I needed to confess about being raped in Mexico, and I still didn't talk about England. And I already was into therapy, and I was 45 years old writing this book when we were talking about the trip to England, and my best friend looks at me and she says, "Shelley, what happened in England?" And finally, that was the first time I said anything because I felt like it was my fault. Because I was drinking, because I was willing to dance, because I was willing to kiss this guy, that somehow is my fault. No, it wasn't. It never was. And I had been, I mean, we're talking, years after the fact that I would have considered myself thriving after all the trauma work that I did and healed from. I went from praying to die every day to happy and whole, but I still hadn't even told a soul about that rape. And so no, it doesn't matter any circumstance. If somebody does that to you, you are not at fault and you have nothing to be ashamed of. And you do not have to continue. And so, I thought I didn't need to talk about that specific event in order to process and move past it, but I did.
So absolutely, and I want to emphasize what you just said, and just pulling just more pieces from this article. Again, this article is written by Juliana Bragg, and I do not know Juliana, but I want to say thank you, Juliana, for taking the time to write such a beautiful article pertaining to our children. In this article, there is a reference from Sherry Hamby. Sherry is a professor of psychology at the University of South in Suwanee, Tennessee. And then Dr. Krista Meharry is a licensed clinical psychologist and assistant professor in the Department of Psychology and Human Development at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. So, from this article, it says sexual victimization is another key concern teens and parents should be aware of. Even if an incident doesn't involve rape, coercion of any kind, forced kissing, non consensual touching, or pressure to engage in sexual activities is still considered sexual assault. Consent must always be explicit, enthusiastic, and ongoing, meaning it can change at any point during an interaction, can be said. So what that means is I can change my mind. And I think young people need to understand that. I think young people are walking around with guilt and with shame and feeling like I did something wrong because I allowed this to happen, or maybe even I started it and then I didn't want to. You have absolutely every right to change your mind at whatever point in the process that you're in. I don't care if you were drinking. I don't care what you were wearing. I don't care where you are or who you were with. You can change your mind. No
I don't care
means
if you're
no.
naked, you can
You
change your mind.
change your mind. If I walk out my front door totally and completely naked, that does not give you a right to touch me, to say anything to me, or do anything. It does not. If I do not invite you to my body, you do not have a right to touch me at all. It does not matter your clothes, your behavior. It just doesn't. And so that's something that young people need to know and understand, because part of a trauma, I believe, is getting through that part of the guilt, feeling like I did something wrong. I brought this on myself, or I helped the situation to go. And that right there is enough to crush you just under the weight of that guilt, let alone the actual act that happened. So I believe that, in helping our young people deal with trauma, guilt is one area where we need to be encouraging and to help them understand, no, again, this is not your fault. There is nothing that you can do to make someone rape you. There is nothing that you can do to make someone beat you. There's
Yeah.
nothing that you can do to make someone put drugs in your drink. There
Yes.
is nothing that you can do to make that happen. And so I believe that the area of guilt truly needs to be dealt with and established and pulled off of our young people. So, and with that, Ayana, I would ask you if you have anything that you want to throw in there.
Yeah. I heard you speak about your childhood trauma and what's caused your childhood trauma. And first, I want to condemn you for your strength. I want to appreciate you for your strength and appreciate you for your confidence in telling your story and your trust in us to share your story. The first question I have is, can you explain what trauma looks like within a child?
Well, I think it's different for everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
see, and that's the other thing I've learned through this whole thing, and you can't. So we're all born with God given gifts and different strengths and weaknesses, and
Mm-hmm.
so every single person can be presented with exactly the same situation and respond differently
Mm-hmm.
because we have a different skill set, and so for me, one of my my core response
Mm-hmm.
was to please and not rock the boat. My
Okay.
sister was the opposite. And so I was always a peacemaker,
Mm-hmm.
and she always was the one that was stepping in and being the shield.
Mm-hmm.
And so her experience in the same household is different than mine. And and so there is no one size fits all when it comes to that. And that was the other question that I got asked on Tuesday was like, well, what signs would anybody have known? I said, no, no one would have known. I was practically the valedictorian of my class. I wasn't, but close. And
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the top three, two athlete of my class. So, I'm outperforming everybody in academia. I'm in athletics. I'm friends with everybody in school, and so and I had friends that knew me for like since elementary school that might not have been super close to me, but even my close friends had no idea that any of this was going on. And people would say, Shelly, I wanted to be you. I had no idea. So for me, you weren't seeing anything. There was no signs, and I didn't act out. I didn't do any of those things, and so I know I'm an anomaly. But I did have an opportunity a couple years ago to go to this class that they're teaching at a high school where it was a special class. It was like this 6 week class. I think every school in the nation should be doing this instead of like freaking calculus. And I'm an engineer, so I like math. But so for 6 weeks, this eclectic group of 30 different kids got pulled into this leadership program. They
Mm-hmm.
volunteered to come to this class, and this class that I went and talked, I told my story. It was about self-limiting beliefs. Okay, so in this classroom, there was the the total superstar quarterback, the superstar girl athlete, the total smartest kid in the class. There was there was a whole there was a couple kids struggling with their sexual identity. There
Mm-hmm.
was there was a whole mix of kids, okay, and they're all in this class. And at the end of this, I tell my story, and then there's a little work, like we worked in small groups, and everyone had to come up with their self-limiting belief. Every single kid, almost it was almost the same response, but it was all around I'm not good enough. It
Wow.
didn't matter if you were the top achiever or you were struggling. And one girl, I knew because I know now what I can see that
Mm-hmm.
she was in an abusive home. I knew that. I knew it from her demeanor. I knew it from her how she carried herself.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't tell me that. She hugged me when she left. I knew that. But and I can't explain how I know it. I think it's just it's something that you recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And but that was something that was very interesting to me, is that, these kids weren't all just friends. This was a special class. It pulled from all the school, different grade levels. I think they were all juniors and seniors, but every single one of them didn't feel good enough. We're
Yeah.
not instilling in our youth that they're good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then around this whole sexual thing, everything's over sexualized. Everything, I'm very close with my nephews, and I hear all this stuff, and I can't believe, like, the thought process that they're disgusted with,
Mm-hmm.
and and the culture of what it's like right now with teens, and
Mm-hmm.
being pressured into all sorts of stuff that I don't think most of them want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question, Ayana, because it's like I
Yeah.
went off squirrel. But
So, do you have another question, Ayana?
Oh yes. While writing your book, Beautiful Ashes, you had to bring up a lot of your trauma. And sometimes when people bring up their trauma, it like leads them back down that dark hole that they was in. Or oftentimes it can bring light to someone else's situation. So how did you remain positive and how did you stick with positive thoughts while writing your book and having to speak upon your trauma?
yeah, well, that's a good question. So literally, my coping mechanism, because my coping mechanism was numbing. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't I didn't fall into some of the other coping mechanisms that were more destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And I numbed my feelings, and so that was the hardest part, because I could I'm a dyslexic engineer, so I had my friend who's a writer help me co-author. She basically did it as a ghost. She didn't want to put her name, but so I would tell her my story. I'd say she would wordsmith it, as I call it, and send it back to me. I'd read it. I'd be like, yeah, 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 and we got to a point. She's like, Shelly, I need to know what you were thinking and you were feeling. I'm like, I know, Becky. That's the most important part of what was I thinking and what was I feeling. And so I literally took my laptop back to my therapist, and I hadn't been in my therapist's office in over a decade because I didn't need to be. And I went through it all again, and
Mm-hmm.
I brought it all back up. But I've learned so much from everything that I've been through. So here's the one thing that gets us stuck in depression is feeling sorry for ourselves, and it starts with the question why. Why
Yeah.
did this bad thing happen to me? Why? And so fine, it's a natural human response to be like,
Mm-hmm.
really, why did I get in this car accident? Why did I
Yeah.
do, 100%, this is the answer, 100% of the time is because we need to learn something.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of life is to be born and get a body, and then, basically master our carnal carnal desires, and then develop our characters. That I'm a Christian, so for me it's develop Christ-like characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that without adversity.
Yeah.
You can't, you got to start with humility, because that's what makes us teachable. You can't learn empathy or understanding or compassion, endurance, patience, long suffering. I mean, long suffering by definition is suffering long.
Mm-hmm.
So, and charity is the pinnacle. It's like the summation of all the characteristics of the Savior. And so really, adversity and hard things
Yeah.
is an opportunity for growth. And that's the mind shift. I mean, yeah, I did all kinds of trauma therapy, and that was necessary because of what I have been through. But it's really shifting your mind and understanding, why are we here? We're here to learn. We're here to grow. So it's okay to whine for a second and say, why is this crappy thing happening?
Yeah.
But you have to take it in and realize that you it's an opportunity to try to learn something. So I started asking what and how. What am I supposed to be learning it, and how can I use that to help myself and others? And the thing is that, and it goes back to us being born with different strengths and weaknesses. Nobody has it easier or harder than anybody.
Yeah.
If you try to compare somebody else's hard relative to them, it's the same. If I get pushed to my breaking point because my mother was murdered and I was raped twice in 7 months, and that pushed me to a roof where I wanted to jump, or if, and I'm going to trivialize this because I'm trying to be extreme. If somebody else is suicidal or something because they didn't get asked to prom, or they don't know what dress to wear, it doesn't matter how you got to that breaking point. What matters is, what are you going to do when you get there, and what are you going to take from it as something positive, the learning, and so there is a quality in adversity, and when we try to pit ourselves and compare ourselves, it just it's a never ending circle of thinking that we're hard done by, and that just gets you stuck, and you can get stuck there forever. I was stuck there for a long time. So
So,
that's how.
well, Shelley, as Ayana was saying before, we do commend you for sharing your story and for what
Yeah.
you do and for being that light and that open door for young people to be able to share, and even for you to be able to see. It's because of your experience to be able to see someone else's pain. I believe another step in helping young people to heal from their trauma is believing them,
Yeah.
believing what you see in front of you, believing the words that you hear come out of their mouths. When a young person comes to a point when they have that courage and are able to open up and say, this is what happened, this is happening, in addition to assuring them this is not your fault, we absolutely should believe the words that are coming out of their mouth, because some young people have some stories that would just blow your mind. And our young people are dealing with issues. They're taking issues from middle school to junior high school, into college, from college, if it's not dealt with, then into our adult years. And so some of us find ourselves at 40, 50, and 60 years old dealing with the issues from our childhood because we never did. We just carried it through every
Yeah.
step. But when a child, when a young person, when a young adult opens up and says, this is what happened, no matter how extreme you may believe that story is, no matter how ridiculous you might think it sounds, then we owe them the respect. We owe them the love. We owe them the care to believe, and then to help them take the steps that are necessary to get help. And
Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about our experiences with domestic violence and how when we began to work through our issues and when we came to a safe space and when we were out of our abusive relationships, that really gave us time for whatever reason to then go back into our childhoods. And it was like then issues started coming up, and it was like, well, no, abuse didn't start when I got married. It didn't start when I was 20 something, 30 something. No, I could remember back now. And I remember some of the craziest stories. I lived with my grandmother for a time, and I'm telling you, she was just one of the meanest people I ever seen in my life. Nobody else around me would believe that. Like I was 15 in the house, and there was one phone in the house. She had this like really long phone cord, so wherever she was, she would take the phone with her. And one day she left the house and she locked the phone in her bedroom because she didn't want me to use the phone, which I really didn't care. But she locked the phone in her bedroom. She would do things like that. And one day, one of my uncles came into the house. He came over. He said, "Where's the phone? You need to use the phone." I said, "Well, she locked in her room." And he looked at me. He's like, "What?" I'm like, "You see it anywhere? It's in her room." He kicked her door open. He kicked the door open, broke the lock, got the phone, and said, "Now, this is what we're going to do." But those are the things that happen. And
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't even know the phone number. Like she didn't want me to have the phone number. So people would ask me, like, what's your phone number? Like, I don't know. And I would say I don't know, and I really wouldn't care because and they just wouldn't know how to take it. Now I can tell that story as an adult. Now they listen to me. But when I was 15 saying that, nobody paid attention to me.
Yeah.
When I was
Mm-mm.
16 saying I had a job, a summer job, and a person that I worked for, he owned the store that I worked in. And one day he called me into his office. This room was just absolutely just dark. There was just one light on. You could just barely see anything. But the light was shown on top of a desk. There was money on covering the whole desk, just stacks of money. And he said to me, I'm glad that you're working here and I want you to be a special friend. And I'm standing there like, what is this? That's all he said. And then I left. I went home. I told my grandmother what happened. I called, the people in charge of the program. I told them what happened. They said, don't go back in there. They said, we're going to get you another job. We're going to take care of this. The next day, my grandmother told me, go back. You have a job. Go in there. So I went, and then when they called me, like, where are you? What are you doing? What happened? Like I was there, and we told you not to go back in here. I said, my grandmother told me to go, and like they couldn't believe it. It was like, it was like, I mean, and it was, she didn't just say go. It was an argument. It was up and down. It was horrendous. Who would believe that?
Mm-hmm.
So again, now as an adult, I can say this. But then they were like, why did you do that? Why did you make that decision? I didn't make the decision. I knew
Mm-hmm.
it was I knew that wasn't a safe space for me. But this is what this woman told me to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
again, my point being, a 13, a 14, a 17, a 20, a 25-year-old can come to you and say, this is what happened. This is what has happened. And it may not make any sense to you. But if they're
Right.
coming to you, they need some kind of help. And if you can't
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
help them, you owe it again, you owe it to them out of love and respect and concern and care to point them in the
Mm-hmm.
right direction, to help them
Mm-hmm.
get what they need so they
Yeah.
don't stay in that trial. I can't imagine if I had not called the supervisor and spoke to her personally, I can't imagine what would have happened because my grandmother wanted me to go back and kept telling me to go back in there. So it was like she, as crazy as it sounds, it was like you are setting me up to be hurt, and for
Mm-hmm.
what?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes to another point for young people. A lot of the times that you are hurt and you are in situations, it happens at the hands of a person that you know and love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Happens,
That.
yeah. So I'll say this, Shelly, and I'll give it to you. It really, I think that's another issue in helping young people deal with trauma. It's like you not only are you dealing with the hurt and the pain, but you're dealing with the person that did this. That makes it
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
confusing. It hurts more because it's
Mm-hmm.
not just the act, it's the person who did it. And it is
Mm-hmm.
very,
Right.
very common to love the person that is hurting you. I love my
Yeah.
mom. I love my dad, my brothers, my sisters, my neighbor who's been there all my life. I love this person who helped raise me, but they're hurting me. And so that's a conflicting spot that our young
Mm-hmm.
people find themselves in also in dealing with trauma. And so Shelly, I'll give that to you too.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean I never stopped loving my dad. I still love my dad. I hate everything that he's done, and that's the other confusing part is that you don't know. You can't recognize abuse if you experience it at the hand of your parents. So I mentioned earlier I'm close with my nephews, and one of them is actually living with us right now, and they're we're like a frat house because we have a 12-seat theater in the basement, and so all the teenagers always come over here and hang out. And just this week, one of his friends that um, gotten close to over the last couple years, because his mom died 5 years ago of cancer. And he would tell, so he's counseling with me, and he's mechanically inclined, and all the boys talk to me because I talk to them. And when they're over, I'll stay up, and you wouldn't believe the conversations that I have at 1, 2, 3 in the morning with these teenagers. And And so anyway, over time, I'm noticing, I don't know his dad. And I'm like, son, this is off. This is off. And so, you know, a couple, nothing like major, and it wasn't abuse. It was just like, really, your dad's not going to help you do that, you know, that kind of thing. And to the point that I asked my other nephew, who's good friends with him, and you know, nothing. It was like there was no identification of anything. Well, this Monday, he's 16, and over something completely dumb, his dad kicked him out. And I'm like, what? And so then he came here, and I've been talking with him, and his boss had recognized the same pattern that I did of his dad, but he knows his dad more, and has actually called his dad. And this boy, he's like, well, when my boss called my dad and to tell him X, Y, and Z, he's like, I didn't even know why he was concerned. Like he didn't recognize that there wasn't quite, you know, that was just how it was.
Yeah.
And so that's how it was for me. And mine was extreme. I mean, this case isn't super extreme. They got in a disagreement over something stupid, and by all means, the dad is not in the right. And anyway, but it's not abuse. But the point is he couldn't recognize the behavior that was inconsistent with what it should be. Just like I had extreme behavior in my environment that I was much older before I even recognized that the extreme stuff was wrong, let alone the subtle stuff that was just normal. So that's a huge part of the problem.
Absolutely.
And again, some of I'm going to say it, the entertainment, the programming, like the programs, the movies, the music, it all propagates some of this toxic dysfunction. And so I think and you know, the nuclear family has been exploded, and you know, dysfunction breeds dysfunction.
Yeah.
It's like a snowball effect rolling down the hill, just gaining speed.
Absolutely. Ayana, you have a question or comment?
Yeah. So I heard you talk about like that sometimes like a child can get like defensive with their trauma. What advice would you give a child when they're going through trauma and they get defensive when someone is just trying to help them?
Well, I mean, I think it's not so much defensive is that they don't recognize that it's even abuse. You know, when it can be really, and really what I'm talking about is things like that would be, I would consider maybe neglect. And it's not neglect in the fact that the kid's not eating or doesn't have a roof over their head, but emotionally neglected.
Yeah.
Their emotional needs are neglected. Maybe some of financial, you know, and again, there's a whole myriad of possibilities there. But I think it's, you know, really, it really comes back to you have to establish good, healthy relationships with kids in general.
Yeah.
So that they trust you and they see you. I mean, that's why I got the phone call on Monday. You know, and it's because he knows he can trust me. And if you want to be an advocate for kids, you have to not be judgmental. You have to allow them to, you know, do some of the stupid things that kids do
Yeah.
without always being punitive, and understand, you know, there's a fine line between being a friend too. You can't do that either.
Right.
But also it's really about trying to see things from their point of view and not just your own. And I think that's
Yeah.
the same with anybody, really.
Again, as we are talking about how to help young people heal from trauma, speaking from the perspective of a young person, I want to be encouraging to young people where, however old you are, wherever you are, if you have been hurt, if you are being hurt, to seek help in a person or organization that you can trust. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say you don't keep silent, you don't keep secrets, but I
Yeah.
would encourage you to build your confidence and to reach out. If it's not a person, it's visiting a website, calling one of the hotline numbers. You can research numbers and information in a library, in the school
Mm-hmm.
library. Go to the school nurse, one of your teachers, anyone in your church or neighborhood. I've told people walk off the street into a fire department house, into a police station. Um, do what you need to do to help yourself. So, in that sense, I want to be encouraging to a young person, no matter your age, to get the help that you need. And we always tell, especially younger children, if something or somebody is hurting you, then you keep telling until somebody listens to you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now,
keep telling someone different.
yes, keep telling someone different. You keep going until somebody hears you and something is done.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side, I would say to an individual, um, it's one thing if someone comes to you for help. If someone comes to you for help, then you do your best. You do the best that you can with getting them the resources that they need. But when it comes to an individual, if you're trying to approach someone to help them, you need to be equipped and you need to understand what you're doing. And we're talking about young people of all ages. You don't deal with a child in middle school the way you deal with a child in college. You don't
Mm-hmm.
deal with a student in college the way you deal with a student in high school. It's
Mm-hmm.
different. So if you are taking the initiative, if you want to be an advocate, if you want to be a help, you need to be equipped. You need to understand how to relate to, how to speak to, how to talk to this individual. I would even say that you approach young men and young women in a different way.
Yeah.
You need to know what you're doing. And if
Yeah.
you see that there is an issue somewhere, if you see that there is a problem and someone needs help,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay for you to say, I can't, it's not me, I can't help, but I'll put you in touch with this resource. Or you go to someone who knows what they're doing, who will be able to intervene in that situation. Because
Yeah.
sometimes in our trying to help, we can make situations worse. And we don't want to do that. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say understand what you're doing when you're trying to help. And it sometimes it doesn't have to be um, these huge grand gestures. Sometimes it could be like just as Shelley said, make a young person feel comfortable. Like just have a conversation, just talk. Like every
Yeah.
once in a while, let's just check in and see how you are. Like we just talk about nothing for a few minutes, but you
Mm-hmm.
establish a relationship, you establish a rapport, you let them see who you are, how you are. You open that door for yourself where no judgment, I'm not pointing my finger in your face. I'm not coming down on you. Just, hey, how are you? What's up? What are you doing? So make that effort. Um, but it really is, it can be harmful to just jump into somebody's space and say, oh, I want to help you. And you don't have all the facts, you don't have the information, and you don't understand the person that you're dealing with. In that same article that I was reading from, one of the suggestions for parents in dealing with their children would be to take advantage of long car trips. Like, you want to just talk to your child. If you want to be in a car for an hour or two, just open a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, that won't work for everybody. So you need to know your child. You need to know we're getting ready to get in this car for 2 hours. It might not be a good idea to bring this topic up. You need to know your child's personality because that 2 hours can be miserable if you say the wrong thing and don't get the reaction that that you're expecting to get. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying don't do anything, but you need to do the right thing
Yeah.
because 2 hours in a car, it can go wrong. It really can. So again, Shelly, I thank you for being here with us on tonight. And Ayana, thank you so much for your input. But as we're just under the hour, Shelly, I would ask you for your thoughts, your comments, the last word that you would want to leave Love Bay with on tonight, as we're thinking about our young people still. And again, when we say young people, we're as young as possible, through college, because again, unfortunately, some of us 50, 60 years old, we're dealing with issues that we didn't resolve from
Mm-hmm.
our childhoods. And so our young people now, we really want to encourage you to heal, to start your process. Like today is a new day. You can start. So you're not 40 and 50 and 60 years old dealing with, issues that you could have had a handle on 20 or
Yeah.
30 years ago. So Shelly and Ayana, I'll ask you both, to leave us with your final words on tonight. Shelly?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is a lot of times I talked a lot to my friends, and I think in retrospect, my friends, they were being my friends and they were great and they were super supportive, but they didn't know what they were doing either.
Right.
So if you have a friend that you know is in trouble and they're talking to you, and encourage them to talk to an adult that can help them.
Yeah.
And then if they don't on their own, then you can establish a relationship with an adult and feel them out for trust, etc., 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 for your friend. That is the best way you can help your friend, especially if it's something serious like assault and there's a physical danger. And everybody is always reactive to physical, but really the long term wounds are emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And do not believe a single time ever, ever, ever that you have no value. That
Mm-hmm.
is a bold faced lie that is never, ever, ever true.
Yeah.
You have infinite worth to God, you have infinite worth to those that love you. And just because the people that you think should love you may not be the ones loving you the way that they should be, there's people that love you. And so number one, you have infinite worth. Don't ever believe that lie. Number two, nothing is impossible. There's not one thing that is impossible to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a witness to that. I've barely scratched the surface of what I've been through. And even my book doesn't scratch the surface of what I've been through.
Yeah.
And so all things are possible. And don't get stuck. Don't get stuck asking why. Focus on what you can gain. Everything is an opportunity. Whether it feels like it, we get to choose whether we're going to let things become stepping stones or stumbling blocks. If we're going to let them crush us, or if we're going to let them be rocket fuel to propel us forward. So you can do this. Don't believe the lies.
Thank you, Shelly. Ayana?
To touch on what Miss Shelley said, that about your worth, that always remember that you are worth it. Always remember that you are put on this earth for a reason, that you have a purpose on this earth, that you have so many people who are cheer you on daily, so many people who want to see you win, so many people who want to see you happy, so many people who want to see you smile. You have so many people who genuinely love you. So always remember that you are worth it and that you are the one to shine. You are the brighter light in every situation that you come into. And always remember what the Bible says. The Bible says, weeping may endure for a day, but joy shall come in the morning. So whatever you're going through right now, it's just a small season. But when you get out of this season, it's gonna be something bigger and something better to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you both. So our Love Bay family, and especially our younger part of young Love Bay, we love you. We love you. We believe you. We
Mm-hmm.
trust and have faith in you, so you can move forward and get the healing that you need. You do not
Mm-hmm.
have to stay stuck in trauma. So if you take away anything from this evening, I would love for that to be, we believe you.
Yes.
We love you, and you do not have to stay stuck in any type of trauma. So, Love Bae, thank you for being with us on tonight so much. If you want to catch up on previous episodes from our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. Thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bae Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bae, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Good evening.